My cheating wife left me for a rich guy, then crawled back and demanded half after I inherited millions. I sat completely still, feeling like I couldn't move as my wife of 25 years explained why she was handing me divorce papers. I could only catch half of what she said. Gary, are you even listening? You seem lost. Sorry, I zoned out for a moment. What were you saying? The terms are simple, there's nothing to argue about. I'm not asking for anything, I'm getting absolutely nothing. You keep the house, the car, and all the money in the bank, sign the papers, and it's all done in 3 months. I was at a loss for words. Marcy and I had been married since high school. We raised our twin daughters, Cindy and Jennifer. We had a comfortable home in the suburbs, we both drove Volvos, and Marcy had her own credit cards and phone. I never denied her anything, I never cheated or mistreated her in any way. She never seemed unhappy or complained about anything. I never saw this coming. Maybe that was the problem, I wasn't paying enough attention. I get how divorce works, Marcy, but can you at least tell me why? It might be too late to change anything, but I want to understand why. Marcy slumped into a kitchen chair. It was clear she didn't want to talk about it, hoping I would just sign the papers and let her go. Just give me the news. You didn't do anything wrong, Gary. You were the perfect husband. Sometimes I wished you'd screw up so I'd have a reason to leave. But you never did. You did a great job raising the kids and putting them through college. You always gave me everything I asked for. I asked for it, even when I was difficult. You got us a nice house. My parents really like you. Don't ever think you did anything wrong, because you didn't. She seemed to be about 45 years old. She had a nice complexion and her light brown hair looked perfect, shining in the sunlight. She jogged often, kept her body toned, and tanned during the week. Marcy thought she was just as perfect as I was, or so she claimed. I couldn't figure out what was really going on. I'm sorry, but this doesn't make any sense. There has to be a reason. You can't just say it's okay and leave it at that. I'm trying to handle this in a way that doesn't hurt your feelings or make me look bad. Let's just leave it at that. No, Gary, I've found someone else. He's a real estate developer with a beautiful apartment overlooking the river and a stunning black Mercedes. He looks wealthy and totally in love with her. You always were and always will be a clerk in a grocery store. I don't blame you for your job, because you always provided for us and made enough to keep the family comfortable, but you will always be a clerk. I wanted more than that. I never thought you would change for me. You were happy with what you were doing and I didn't see you strive for more. It hurt. Even though I was the manager of the food department, she still saw me as a clerk. When I had the chance to advance my career and move away, I turned it down to keep our family together, and look how that turned out. It was painful, but I didn't think it was worth mentioning. Does this rich, handsome guy have a name, Clayton Manning? He's the president of Keystone Development Company. Marcy sat up straight in her chair, her eyes darted around the room, then she looked me in the eye. Yes, I was trying to avoid the subject, but since you insist, yes. We were still married. Yes, I was still married. I cheated on you. I was unfaithful. I was. Are you satisfied now? I sat there for a moment, then reached for the divorce papers, signed them in 3 places, initialed 2, and handed them to her. I think he's better for you. I'm sorry to disappoint you. I got up, and as I left the room, Marcy yelled, no, that's not why he wasn't better than you, just different. Don't you dare believe that, Gary. Don't you dare. By then I was out the door. I was so focused on my work and hobbies that I didn't even notice Marcy gradually moving her things out of the house. By the time she handed me the papers, she had already moved most of her clothes and personal belongings to C's apartment. She thoughtfully left behind all the wedding and family photos so that I could enjoy them while she was gone. When I returned home, she was nowhere to be found. Her Volvo was still in the driveway, and I figured she didn't need it anymore. On the kitchen table, she left a power of attorney to sell the house, and she left me a copy of her will. I spent the rest of the night getting rid of the beer in the fridge, by which time I realized the deed was done. there was no going back and I didn't want to anyway. Marcy was gone and would be gone the next morning. I called work and took 3 months overdue vacation. They had been nagging me to take time off, so there was no problem. I had plenty of vacation and sick leave. They wanted to call Marcy, but I didn't have her new phone number. I had 3 months to get myself together and figure out what I was going to do. I disconnected my landline, changed my cell phone number and cancelled the one Marcy had that the Volvo dealer had given me. The low book value of Marcy's car. I had a friend from high school, Terry, who is now a real estate agent. He agreed to sell the house without listing it at a low price and with a quick settlement. To be on the safe side, I cancelled all my credit cards and opened new bank accounts. I cashed in my life insurance policies. It was time to get things in order. I went through the house and collected everything that might belong to it. My wife had enough stuff to fill 3 garbage bags. I put the girls' personal belongings in boxes and put them in the closet next to the house. I spent 3 hours going through the family photos. I put all the girls' pictures in a box for her. All of Marcy's pictures went in the trash can. It may have been stupid, but I didn't care. The main problem I was facing was a lack of direction. I had no idea what I was going to do. What would I do after 3 months? Would I stay here or leave? Would I keep working or find something new? I had 2 hobbies. I mostly collected coins, especially those with an Indian head on them. They were easy to collect and readily available. I bought and sold them on eBay and enjoyed it. My other passion was geocaching. It gave me an excuse to get outside and get some excitement. Marcy hated this activity. Because of the ticks, poison ivy, and having to walk, I didn't see how I could make a living doing any of these activities when I wasn't busy with my hobbies. I spent time with the Wall Street Journal. Cindy and Sandy gave me a subscription every year for Christmas. I researched all the information available on the Keystone Development and Clayton Manning. Terry Davis managed to dig up more information on Clayton and his latest project than I ever could. He dug into some details with a buddy of his at a local bank. There was no sign of Marcy. The girls called every week, but I hadn't heard from their mom either. I felt like they were on my side, but Marcy was still their mom, so I'm sure they needed to show some support. I had a few yard sales and got rid of a bunch of stuff. I left enough furniture in the house so it still looked good to potential buyers. Marcy and Clayton's picture popped up in the society section of the Sunday paper. A few more weeks went by. Terry made me a lowball offer on the house. It was way below the appraised value, but they wanted to close the deal in 60 days, which suited me just fine. He had some interesting dirt on Clayton and wanted to talk about it. We set up a lunch meeting. I figured I needed to get out of the house for a while. I could use it. Unfortunately, I had already found all the geocaches there, but there were 3 landmarks on top of the mountain. Landmarks are those points scattered around the country that surveyors and real estate agents use to determine property lines. Finding landmarks is like a bonus game for hardcore geocachers. Today I decided I was going to find all 3 landmarks on the mountain, and besides my GPS I had to bring a metal detector SP. A piece of rebar in the woods is not exactly a walk in the park, so I could use all the help I could get. The GPS would get me close enough to the spot. Hayes Mountain was a big chunk of land, almost 2,000 acres, and most of it belonged to the Madison Land Trust. They were always trying to expand it, but with subdivisions and industrial parks gobbling up the open space, they relied on donations to keep going. Next to the trust's parking lot there was this orchard and farmhouse for sale with a big sign out front. Once I parked, I strolled over to the fence by the orchard just to take a peek. It felt kind of sad to think that this beautiful place might soon be plowed under for development. Are you thinking of buying it or just admiring it? The view, came a voice from behind me. I turned to see an old man approaching wearing overalls and a John Deere cap. I chuckled. If I had $1 million, I'd snap it up in a heartbeat, I replied. He grinned back. Do you think you'll have any trouble selling it? He asked. Well, I've got a few people interested, but I'm holding out as long as I can, he replied. Why is that? I asked. I was hoping the land trust would snap it up, but they're short on cash. They want to keep the fruit trees as is, but the developers want to bulldoze everything. I think it'll be a real asset to the area, I said, but how can the trust compete with these big companies? He explained. I've offered them a sweet deal. Even though it's listed for $1 million, I'm willing to let them have it for $600,000, but they can't seem to get it to sell. They can't seem to get it to sell, 000, but they can't seem to come up with the cash in time. If they can't, then that darn real estate guy gets his hands on it. He grumbled. He's been hounding me every week. An option isn't a done deal, is it? I asked. Nope, he said he'll pay $100. If he can't come up with the cash, he loses the money. It's a good deal for me, but I don't want him to win, he added. Hugh's got the money tied up, so he's safe. The problem is, he needs all 6 properties to make the deal work, so he's offering more than it's worth. What if you don't sell him the option? I asked. He'll be in big trouble, the old man chuckled. If he doesn't, the deal falls apart. Get that lot, the whole deal will fall apart and he'll lose everything he invested, maybe $1 million, his backers will bail and he'll be left high and dry. I'd help you out if I could, I said sympathetically. Sure thing, he replied, sounding a bit resigned. We all laughed again and I set off on my walk. His mention of Keystone piqued my interest. The landmarks were about 1 mile apart, at least if you were flying straight. A bird flies straight, but on the mountain it felt more like 2 miles. Finding the first 2 markers was a breeze. They were your typical surveyor's markers, but the third one was a different story. It was older, harder to find, buried under years of forest debris. When I finally stumbled upon it, I discovered a small brick monument with a bronze plaque attached. It was hidden under layers of leaves and dirt. I snapped a picture thinking I would share it with the world. As I moved away from the marker, my metal detector began to beep. It was faint, but it was definitely there. I slipped on my headphones and began to scan the area nearby. After a bit of poking around, I unearthed a small iron box wrapped in oil-soaked canvas. It was rusty but sturdy with a heavy bronze lock that is usually found in this type of find. On public land they are considered treasures and turned over to the authorities, but for some reason I didn't feel right about that, so I tucked the box in my bag and headed home. On the way back I couldn't stop wondering about the contents of my little find: gold coins, historical documents from the Civil War. The possibilities were endless, limited only by the size of the container. I didn't want to damage the lock, but I couldn't see any other way in, so I reluctantly decided to sacrifice it with my bolt cutter. Inside the box, I found another layer of oiled canvas underneath, a dozen pennies, but these weren't just any pennies, they were large coins, dating back to 1793. Surprisingly, they were in remarkably good condition, with no green corrosion. I've never really collected large cents myself, preferring Indian heads. I remembered a book my grandfather had left me called The Quirks of the Penny that dealt with the different types and varieties of large cents. I found the book boring because I didn't own any of the coins it talked about. It had sat untouched on my shelf for nearly 30 years, but tonight it would finally serve a purpose. I stayed up until dawn, poring over the pages with my grandfather's book and magnifying glass, using my scanner to take detailed, high-resolution photos of each coin. Every tiny imperfection on the stamps was crystal clear, and the condition of each coin was obvious. I slept in until noon, feeling refreshed but eager to see how things were going at work. One of the company's bigwigs had inquired about me, but I had bigger fish to fry, so I didn't dwell on it. Getting a safe deposit box from the bank was the next step. After hours of research on the internet, I was shocked to discover that my pennies were worth several $1 million, not only because of their age, but because of their condition and the variety of mintages. It made me realize why criminals go to such lengths to launder money. Over breakfast at IHOP, I saw another picture in the paper of Mark and Clayton at an art gallery opening, and the next step clicked in my mind. When the safe arrived, I contacted John Smurd and asked him to hold off on any decisions about the land for a few days. I felt a sense of urgency. The rest of the day was spent researching coin dealers and auction houses, looking for any signs of trouble. I finally settled on Towers and Burns in New York City. they seemed capable of handling controversial sales discreetly. I made an appointment with them for Monday afternoon. To round out the day, I called the girls and arranged to have lunch together on Monday morning to keep the morning free. When I arrived at Towers and Burns, I was impressed by the modern, elegant showroom. After giving my name, I was escorted to a less glamorous part of the building. "Well, welcome to New York, Mr. Simmons. I hear you have some interesting coins to show us. Is this your first visit to the city?" "My daughters go to Columbia University, so I've been here before, but never on business." "I don't doubt your knowledge of coins, but do you have someone on your team who is an expert in early copper coins?" Maurice Cookson, who had written several guides to large cents and half cents, soon entered, looking older than his photographs, but then again, who cares if he looks younger? "I have 12 special coins I want to sell today. I hope to sell 4 and keep the 5th for your consideration. The others I'll keep for now if today goes well." "I'll offer those to you as well. If that sounds incredible, it's because I believe 6 of them fall under conditional census status. Mr. Cookson can confirm if I'm right or not. Since coins like this don't come up for sale very often, I thought you might be interested." "Where did these coins come from?" James asked. "They were passed down to me by my grandfather when he passed away, not to cast out Mr. Simmons, but the story is a little hard to believe." "Can you show us what you have?" I laid out 4 photos on the table, each showing both sides of one of the coins I'm offering today. They're magnified about 5 times their actual size and crystal clear. James and Maurice examined each photo carefully for several minutes. "What's your asking price for these 4? $3 million for them." "I initially thought $1 million, but your figure is not out of the realm of possibility. Maurice really knows his stuff when it comes to pennies," James remarked. "I'm willing to offer $800. I asked, "I have a special letter from the Land Trust about donating land. I want you to take a look at it, along with an ad for the John Smurd Orchard," I said as I handed them over. "I want you to buy this property and donate it to the Madison Land Trust. The price is $6,000, 000. You'll get a hefty tax deduction and earn some serious karma points. Give us a second, please," James said, motioning to Maurice. They huddled at the far end of the room, deep in conversation. After a few minutes Maurice stepped out and James returned to the table. "Got any coins on you?" he asked. "Yep, and I've got a 5th I'd like to keep in the mix," I replied. "Mr. Cookson." Mr. Cookson reappeared with a purple Crown Royal bag. "We're willing to honor your terms on the land deal and hope you'll do the same on the coin deal," he said, dumping the bag's contents on the table. It was a treasure trove of nearly 100 coins, mostly gold with some silver mixed in. The retail value of this collection is around $300,000. 000 explained. "For various reasons we've had trouble selling them, but you shouldn't have any problems. You've sold coins on eBay before, right?" I nodded. "Your grandfather's coin should fly off the shelves and we'll both come out ahead," James said with a wink. After some thought I agreed. I handed the 4 pennies to Mr. Towers and we sealed the deal with handshakes all around. "Now Mr. Simmons, tell us about this 5th coin," James prompted. I held up the photo describing it as the top-rated one. 793 Strawberry Co. I've ever seen. I rated it an 8, but I'm no expert, I added. Both James and Maurice leaned in eagerly to see the photo. Maurice had a big grin and James had a twinkle in his eye. "How much?" James asked. "Best offer as long as you can figure out how to pay me," I replied. "Would you like some coffee, Mr. Simmons?" Leisha, an absolutely stunning woman, asked as she entered the room. "The room? Sure, black's fine," I replied. They left the room and about 30 minutes later James returned with Letitia. "Hello, I'm Leisha Rothberg. Do you have a passport, Mr. Simmons?" she asked in a deep yet feminine voice. "Yes, I do," I replied. "Good, we'll be heading to JFK shortly to set up a new offshore bank account for you. Do you have anything for Mr. Towers?" she continued. I handed over the 793 Strawberry and James practically lit up with excitement. Thank you," he exclaimed as he left the room. We never agreed on a price, but Tower was very interested in those 7 coins. Mr. Towers agreed to keep the small bag of coins until I returned, and before I knew it, Letitia and I were on a plane to the Cayman Islands. She didn't say much. During the flight, when we landed, photographers clamored to take her picture. She seemed both irritated and amused by the attention. I had no idea why she was such a celebrity. It was my first time flying first class and it was over in a flash. A bright yellow mini SUV awaited us at the terminal. Letitia wasted no time jumping into the driver's seat, flashing. She seemed to find my discomfort amusing. 20 minutes later we arrived at a mid-rise condominium building. Letitia owned the entire building but used the top floor as her personal space. She took care of anything Mr. Simmons asked as she left the room. I'm not one to gush about women, but Letitia Rothberg was captivating. We stepped out onto a small balcony overlooking the ocean. It was stunning, but the wind was a bit much for my taste. She was probably trying to impress me with the luxurious surroundings, but my mind was more on the new bank account. You're not much of a talker, Mr. Simmons. Don't you have any questions? She asked. It seems odd to me that someone of your stature would be drinking beer from a bottle, I remarked. I imagine you'd be sipping champagne or martinis instead. I usually think it's best to wait, but I suppose you could tell me why we had to come here to open a bank account. I added. It's a simple, safe place to stash your cash. I think it will serve you well, she replied. I think it will serve you well, she replied. You have 7 more coins after all. That still seems like overkill, I admitted to my relief. We walked back inside, away from the wind. Can you handle this? Leisha asked suddenly, catching me off guard. I brought you here to be my save for a few days. Her unexpected comment brought a smile to my face. I knew she was joking, but it was a humorous moment. She had a great sense of humor, looked stunning and had a fortune to boot. What more could a guy ask for? If only I was a decade younger. Teasing an old man won't do any good, I joked, and we both laughed at the situation. Come on, Mr. Simmons, let's go get some fresh lobster for dinner, she suggested, and we downed the last of our long necks before heading out. As we walked out the door, the restaurant was fantastic, but the wine the hostess had chosen did not sit well with me. I tried to be polite, but my discomfort must have been obvious. What's wrong with the wine, Mr. Simmons? She asked. I'm sorry, it's just a reflex. When I was 18 I got sick from cheap white wine, and ever since the smell or taste of it makes me nauseous. I explained, but don't worry, it's good wine. A few minutes later we had 2 fresh long necks. Strangely, there wasn't much conversation during the meal. At the end we each had a slice of key lime pie and sipped coffee. So tell me about yourself. Are you married? Any kids? What do you do for a living? She inquired, eager to learn more about me. We have all night and I'm curious about you. I have 2 daughters, both of whom are studying something in international banking at Columbia University. To be honest, I'm not quite sure what they're studying. I'm just footing the bill, which is fascinating. I actually have a master's degree from Columbia, and I teach there occasionally. I've met both of my daughters, I continued. Did you see them this morning? She asked. We had lunch together. They're not too thrilled when I make them skip class, I replied with a smile. You must have married early to have 2 daughters in college, she observed. Yes, it sounds like a line from a movie. I chuckled. I felt at ease with this Mediterranean beauty. I could have talked to her for hours. As for me, I'm currently separated from my wife. That's a strange word to use. I admitted that she left me for some rich wheeler-dealer. He's probably into building shopping malls or business complexes, given his fancy car and big apartment. She said she's decided to move on and the divorce should be finalized in about 4 weeks, that's all. A flimsy excuse to end a good marriage, she remarked sympathetically. Yeah, I thought everything was fine until she met this guy. I guess she was never happy with my career choices. I reflected. I had opportunities to move up, but she wouldn't budge. I wasn't thrilled, but I thought it was necessary to save the marriage, or now I just feel empty. And what about you? I asked her, turning the spotlight back on her. There was a moment of silence. How do you tell a beautiful, wealthy, successful woman that you run a grocery store? She noticed my discomfort and responded accordingly. saying it's no big deal, or we can talk about it later. No, it's fine, I'm not embarrassed about what I do, I assured her. It's just that being a grocery store manager isn't exactly a job. Is not exactly a glamorous job that impresses the ladies. My daughters don't mind, but my wife often conveniently forgot to mention it in conversation. I could tell it bothered her. Do you enjoy your work? She asked. Yes, I do, and I'm pretty good at it, I replied as the waiter brought more coffee and cleared the table. Mr. Simmons, I know we've only just met, but I believe first impressions are the most important. I know we've only just met, but I believe first impressions are important. So what's your first impression of me? She asked, her question putting me in a bit of a quandary. If I told her what I really thought, I might push her away, but if I tried to flatter her, she'd see right through it and think I was being insincere. In short, I see you as beautiful, intelligent, educated, and confident, I said, noting a slight hint of sarcasm. I was hoping for honesty, she admitted. I'm sorry, but we were having such a nice evening, I didn't want to spoil it. I apologize. Do you really have such a low opinion of me? She questioned, her tone turning serious. Maybe that's why your wife left you for another man. If you hadn't always tried to please her, your marriage would have been stronger. Her words stung, but I had to admit there was some truth to them. You use your beauty and charm to get what you want. You use your beauty and charm to get what you want. You're used to getting your own way, and I sense a bit of a spoiled attitude. You play with men, but you're afraid of commitment, yet you seem to know how to handle money. You know how to spend and invest wisely. If you weren't so focused on proving yourself equal to any man, you might actually make a good mother, I said, feeling uncomfortable but also a bit irritated by her earlier remark about my marriage. For a moment we just sat there in silence, staring at each other. Do you really think I'd make a good mother? She asked her. Suddenly the tension eased and the mood brightened as we drove back to the condo. My night as Letitia Rothberg's supposed bed slave turned out to be rather dull. It's hard to get intimate when you're in separate bedrooms, but that was fine with me since I wasn't expecting anything anyway. The next morning I woke up to a breakfast spread of fruit, pastries, and hot coffee along with a copy of the Wall Street Journal. About 20 minutes later, Letitia joined me, playfully grabbing a piece of the paper as she settled in, and we sat there quietly, absorbed in our reading and enjoying our coffee as if it were a routine we'd been doing for ages, even though we'd only known her for less than a day. Everything felt so natural and easy with her. I'm sorry, my phone doesn't seem to work here, and I really want to call my daughter, I mentioned, and without hesitation, Letitia offered me her cell phone. Go ahead. It's all yours. Hey Cindy, it's Daddy. Where are you? Are you okay? I asked worriedly. The phone showed London as her location. Dad, I'm in the Cayman Islands and everything's fine, I'm just staying with a friend. I had to borrow her phone to call you since mine's been acting up. Mine's been acting up, Cindy explained. They showed a picture of you on TV last night getting on a plane with Letitia Rothberg. What's going on? I asked. That's the friend I mentioned. What's the big deal? Cindy replied. Why are you with her? You have to be careful, Cindy. Letitia Rothberg is a shark, she's ruthless, I warned her as Letitia walked by from the balcony with a tray of breakfast. I introduced her. This is Cindy, my daughter, she's in New York. Cindy heard me mention Letitia's name and let out a groan over the phone. I could hear her and her sister Sandy discussing it. Why are you there? How do you know her? When are you coming home? Cindy bombarded me with questions before I could answer. Letitia was already reaching for the phone. Hi Cindy, it's Letitia. Your dad was telling me about you and your sister. I'll be in New York tomorrow and I'd love to have lunch with both of you. Where should I pick you up? Of course I couldn't hear Cindy's answer from my end of the conversation. All right, Cindy, talk to you later, bye, Letitia said, handing me back my cell phone. Your daughter said goodbye. Looks like we're having lunch tomorrow. I'll be on my best behavior, even if they think I'm a shark. She laughed, heading for her room. An hour later we Found ourselves at the Federal Reserve Bank of the Cayman Islands with Letitia. Cayman Islands with Letitia's guidance. I set up my first offshore bank account. 20 minutes later I saw that my new account had been credited with $4 million from Towers and Burns. It seemed like a fair price for 215 pennies. After our meal she arranged for a friend to take us to feed manta rays for dinner. I asked about her job at Towers and Burns, and discovered that she actually owns 60% of the company. So what else can you tell me about yourself? I probed, feeling a little embarrassed about my lack of knowledge about her. I was born and raised in London. My father is Syrian and my mother is Turkish. I hold an MBA from Columbia University. Wise, I've been engaged twice but haven't been in anything serious for over 3 years. I've learned not to trust men who show interest in me. Call it cynicism, but I often feel like they have ulterior motives. She shared. That's unfortunate, I responded, feeling a pang of sympathy. I was hoping for a ride back to the condo. Does that mean you don't trust me? Does that mean you don't trust me, you big jerk? She teased. I'm sorry if I seemed insensitive, I didn't mean to. It's just hard for me to relate, I apologized, feeling a little embarrassed. All right, let's just relax, we have a party to attend. She changed the subject, steering the conversation to lighter topics. Later that evening, we found ourselves at a cocktail party in a prestigious hotel. She was the center of attention, everyone treated her like royalty. I, on the other hand, tried my best to blend into the background, feeling out of place in my New York street clothes. At first Letitia felt obligated to stay by my side, but I encouraged her to enjoy herself and let me fade into the background. However, she continued to check up on me throughout the night, and I ended up talking to a couple of Hispanic cattle ranchers from Argentina. Our conversation started with soccer and eventually moved to fishing, despite my limited knowledge of the subjects. When Ramon York mentioned his interest in winter wheat, I listened intently as he explained his investment plans, although I couldn't help but wonder how someone of his apparent wealth could invest in something he seemed to know so little about. My poker face slipped, revealing my confusion. Mr. Simmons, your expression tells me you are not on board with the winter wheat investment idea, Ramon observed. Caught me off guard. My attempt to remain unnoticed had failed miserably. I apologize, Ramon. I'm not really savvy when it comes to investing, and this topic has caught me off guard. This topic is a bit beyond my expertise, I admitted, opting for a casual first-name basis to ease my comfort, but I have a feeling you have some thoughts on the matter, Ramon persisted, trapping me into sharing my opinion. Feeling cornered, I mustered a weak smile. I think I need another drink, I deflected, buying myself some time for the next hour as I listened to an Alabama green grower elaborate on the promising winter wheat crop in Alberta and Saskatchewan compared to the poor crop in the States. His explanation was thorough, but my mind struggled to keep up with the complexity of the discussion. Just as I was running out of witty remarks, Letitia came to my rescue, pulling me away from the intense conversation as we walked away, asking me about the unexpected turn of events. What was that all about, Gary? We were just in the food business, she remarked with a hint of amusement, flashing a small smile in my direction. The next morning we flew back to New York, where a swarm of photographers awaited Letitia's arrival. A courier from Towers and Burns handed me a package containing the coins I had left behind. The divorce and sale of the house went according to plan. Phil Williams from the corporate office had left me several messages urging me to consider relocating to the company's headquarters in New York. This time I agreed. As I said goodbye to my colleagues and prepared for my impending move, I noticed a newspaper photo of Clayton and Marcy at a local politician's barbecue, looking every bit the ideal couple. With 3 weeks to go, I devoted an entire day to scanning and identifying the coins from the bag I had brought back from New York. Determined to make the most of them, I decided to list them on eBay as soon as possible. As long as they didn't run into any sleazy characters, everything should be fine. It took me a whole day to get the coin listings up and ready, along with all the envelopes and labels for shipping. All the money went into my PayPal account, and from there it was off to the races. And from there it was off to my new offshore bank for the weekend. I finally had some time to unwind. My Friday lunch with J.N. Smerd was quite something. He seemed thrilled that Clayton was involved, but not too pleased that I wasn't getting anything out of the deal. Trying to explain it to him would have been a real headache. A real headache. Lunch went off without a hitch, and as he was leaving he handed me the deeds to 5 acres of land on the outskirts of town. Seems good deeds are rewarded. Not long after I said goodbye to J.N., my cell phone buzzed. Cindy and Sandy were landing in Nashville in a few hours, giving me plenty of time to pick them up. They'd chosen Nashville because the airfare was much cheaper than flying to Huntsville, and they were watching their wallets. It was a breeze to get there and pick them up. Cindy couldn't wait to talk about it. The lecture hall was packed with over 300 students for an advanced corporate finance course. In the middle of the lecture, the professor paused to introduce Leisha to the class, and she strutted in like she owned the place. After addressing the class for about 10 minutes, she invited 2 students to lunch at the Western Hotel. You can imagine our shock when she called out our names. Well, she mentioned that she was in the market for a personal assistant, and I guess I fit the bill, I quipped, earning a nudge from Sandy. That's not funny, Dad, get serious, she chided. She was curious about our classes and coursework, Sandy replied with a slight chuckle, and she had a ton of questions about you. We both got the feeling she was interested in more than just being friends, Cindy added with a sly grin. Grin, but why you, Dad? She could have her pick of any guy, Sandy pondered, furrowing her brow. Yeah, think about it, from where we stand, you're a catch, but Letitia Rothberg doesn't know you like we do, remember, even Mom didn't seem to know you that well, Cindy chimed in, her tone turning serious. The air between us grew heavy. I didn't mean to sour the mood or turn her against her, I apologized, feeling the weight of my words settle in. Your mom's a gem and I shouldn't have said that. Don't worry, Dad, we get it more than you realize, Cindy reassured me with a gentle smile. We rode in silence for a while, until just as we crossed into Alabama, SAI's phone lit up with a call. Hey, yeah, we got here about an hour ago, all good. No way, that's great news, I'll pass it on, thanks for the heads up, see you later, bye, Sandy said, ending the call with a grin and a glance. In the rearview mirror I saw Sandy giving Cindy a thumbs up. I asked curiously, leaning over the front seat. Sandy spilled the beans. Guess what, Daddy, Letitia is going to Huntsville Tuesday morning. She expects you to pay for the night and serve breakfast in bed. I was flattered by the news but also felt the pressure from Letitia and now my daughters. It all sounded fantastic and I hoped I was up to the challenge, not just for this one thing. The weekend with the girls went smoothly. They spent Saturday afternoon with their mom, but Clayton was a no-show. I asked them to tell Mom about Letitia. We went through all the things they wanted to leave at the house, and by the time they left, everything was taken care of. I made them a promise on the drive back to Nashville. They made me swear to try to get along with Letitia. When I asked what they meant, Cindy chimed in, just don't upset her. Easy enough, they were excited about my move to town, but I still couldn't figure out what Letitia wanted from an old guy who didn't even own an Armani suit back home. I kicked back with a beer and the Sunday paper. No snapshots of Marcy and Clayton this week, but there was a blurb about the Keystone development hitting a snag with local funding. Financing. Winter wheat futures were taking a nosedive in value, which piqued my interest, so I called Terry Davis and invited him over. It wasn't a fancy lunch, but a couple of cold ones in a chat would do the trick. Clayton Manning had a checkered past, to say the least. He'd been on a roller coaster ride of wealth and debt, dodging creditors and pals who'd lent him cash. I don't think beer ever tasted so sweet. Monday morning turned out better than expected. The coins I put up for auction fetched a better price than I had imagined, 000. They didn't seem like they would fetch that much, but they could have easily reached over $200. 000. In just a little over 2 weeks I'll be a free bird. If you asked me 3 months ago I would have thought it was a nightmare, but today I'm eagerly anticipating it. The folks buying the house had hammered out the financing and we set to seal the deal. It struck me as funny how comfortable Marcy felt with Clayton, that she didn't need any of our shared stuff. I wondered if she would grasp how uncertain her future was. At 3, I had to sit down with the buyers of the house. A fat $200. 000 check went straight to my offshore account. They had no qualms about me crashing at the house for another week. It worked out for both of us. The next morning I got a call before I even had my morning Joe. An unknown caller officially informed me that Miss BR would be touching down at 10:45 a.m. On the Delta flight. I arrived 30 minutes early, feeling a bit jittery. Some paparazzi had gotten wind of her arrival and were camping outside the terminal. I tried my best to keep a low profile. I parked in a short-term lot, not expecting all this hoopla. Instead of waiting for me to pick her up, she decided to walk beside me behind the car. Of course the photographers caught my license plate and the cat was out of the bag. I'm not used to all this hoopla, but Letitia seemed unfazed. She even apologized to me on the way home. Man, I was embarrassed by the emptiness of the house. Over the past few months I had gotten rid of everything I could. The only things left were the essentials that the new owner had agreed to take over after I left. My guest found my attempts at apology amusing. There wasn't a crumb in the house, so we stopped at Taco Bell for a quick bite of her choice. I promised her some Dreamland ribs for dinner. It was refreshing to be around a woman with a hearty appetite. Leisha, I'm glad you're here, but I'm a little confused as to why. I confessed, I thought you'd be back to your usual routine. This is business, silly, she replied with a chuckle. I heard you're moving to New York next week. You need a place to stay and I have a spare room. I'm here to help you pack. A moving van will come by tomorrow morning to haul anything you can't fit in the car, just no furniture. Please, how did you find out I was moving? Find out I'm moving? I asked, genuinely surprised. That's just my thing, she replied casually. I pay attention to the little things and the big things usually fall into place. Sounds like a bunch of bull, I said, trying to sound playful. Are you in cahoots with my daughters or something? I tried to flash an innocent grin, but let's face it, it's hard for an old guy like me to look devious. Her offer caught me off guard, but I couldn't think of a single reason to turn it down. Sure, let's grab some boxes and start packing, I agreed. I'd imagined she'd be more comfortable in a fancy boardroom or a posh bank, but she seemed content to just shoot the breeze with me. I still couldn't shake the slight awkwardness of our age difference. As we sorted through my belongings, we ended up throwing out more stuff than we kept. She had strong opinions about my closet and she wouldn't budge. Despite my pleas for mercy, she promised to take me shopping for some decent clothes once I was settled in New York. When we finished packing, there were more boxes than would fit in my car, but not quite enough for a mover. I hoped she had arranged for a small truck. Are you Gary Simmons? He asked. I've got a delivery for you. Where do you want it? What in the world is this? I muttered, confused. It's from Mr. Ramon Yurt, the driver explained. I got a space in the garage. The space where Marcy's Volvo used to be was now empty. I pointed in that direction and nodded. I caught it. Letitia covered her mouth and tried to stifle her laughter. I guess she found my confusion amusing. 5 minutes later, I was staring at a sleek orange sports car parked next to my old Volvo. What the heck is this? I exclaimed with a hint of pride. The courier explained, this is a 2008 Lamborghini Gallardo Spider Super Lira model. Ain't she a beauty? Letitia could barely contain her giggles. She wasn't making a scene, but it was clear I had no idea what I was going to do with my new gift, but one thing was for sure, I wasn't going to lug it all the way to New York. Miss Funny Pants here could keep her fancy wheels. My guest still had a smile on her face as we drove off. I ordered a full rack of ribs and a couple of beers and asked Ramon to fill me in on the deal. With the car, I asked curiously. Ramon went big on winter wheat. Everyone thought he was crazy when prices started to tank, but he doubled down on the contracts, and in less than a week he raked in over $40 million. She explained he was happy with the cash, but the compliments on his clever move made him even happier. Well, good for Ramon. I hope he didn't drop my name, I remarked. Apparently he wanted to give you credit, but only if you were cool. I didn't know he was planning on doing that, but when the ribs arrived, I watched Letitia dip a few in the Asco sauce before digging in. Man, I adore that girl. You know I'll send this back tomorrow, right? I asked. Don't worry, Ramon won't be offended. He would have offered the money outright, but he probably thought you'd turn it down that way. We had to order extra beers because of all the Tabasco. I felt good and didn't want the night to end at that moment. I would have given anything to spend the night with this gorgeous young lady. I envied these smooth, charming guys who could get any girl into bed in a heartbeat. All I could hope for was a good night kiss. We couldn't talk all night, so I finally had to go home the next morning. The morning was fantastic. As it turned out, all my worries were for nothing. As soon as we entered the house, Letitia grabbed my hand and led me to the bedroom. Being the gentleman that I am, I made sure to take care of her needs first, and in return, I was treated to the best night of passion in my secluded life. Breakfast in bed was simple: juice, coffee and Danish. Sorry, it's the best I can do under the circumstances. I apologized. It's perfect, she assured me. She assured me that although eating off a tray in bed is not as comfortable as it sounds, after a few laughs and some adjustments we moved to the kitchen. Breakfast in bed sounds fancier than it really is, Letitia. I chuckled, not to spoil the mood, but I'm curious why you chose me. I don't have much to offer and you deserve someone great. I've been burned by slick, charming lovers before. I won't fall for that again, she explained. I got it. You're into me, Gary. I was impressed with your deal with James in New York, she said. Oh, just sold a few coins, nothing big. I shrugged. I found your plan to buy trust land intriguing, she continued. Me, a philanthropist? Nah, I see myself as a cunning guy who took advantage of a unique situation to mess with his wife's lover. I smiled. She laughed at that and I couldn't help but smile too. I was amazed at her intelligence and how well she kept it hidden. Was that a mistake on my part? No, Gary, that was brilliant, she reassured me. Her curiosity about me was piqued and she wanted to know more. You couldn't possibly know what I was up to in New York, I protested. True, but I found out later, she admitted. You were checking up on me, weren't you? I realized I wasn't naive. Admittedly, the boost to my self-esteem felt good. Unfortunately, Leisha's not so lucky. Unfortunately, Leisha had an early flight back to New York, so saying goodbye was hard. But she left me feeling satisfied and even entrusted me with the key to her apartment. The dealer couldn't pick up the Lamborghini until the next day, but that was fine, since I had no intention of driving it. Terry Davis called with disturbing news about Keystone Development's financial situation. Clayton had lost most of his backers almost overnight, and rumors of missing funds were swirling. To what do I owe this unexpected pleasure? I inquired. Fired. I need to talk to you about something, she replied. I'm leaving in a few days, but I'll help you any way I can. I noticed the absence of my old Volvo. Marcy questioned. The orange car in the garage. Sorry, Marcy, I sold the Volvo back to the dealer after you said you didn't want it. As for the orange car, it was a gift, but I planned to keep it for myself. Was a gift, but I plan to return it tomorrow, I explained. Marcy was surprised by this term of affection. Curious about the expensive gift, she speculated if it was from my new girlfriend. No, it was a gesture of gratitude from a cattle rancher I helped, I clarified. As the conversation shifted, Marcy hesitated before asking about the money from the house sale. It's all gone, I admitted. You said you didn't want anything, so I sold it back to the dealer. Marcy seemed puzzled but accepted the explanation. When asked about my destination, I revealed my upcoming move to New York for a new job and a significant raise, but chose not to mention my plan to live with Letitia. I didn't plan to spill the beans about the Cayman bank account either. You never mentioned what happened to the apartment, she inquired. It was just rented, the lease ran out and the owner didn't want to renew it, I clarified. So where are you living now, she inquired further. A week crashing at the Holiday Inn until Clayton finds us a new place, I informed her. Ah, I get it now, I remarked, understanding Marcy's motives for wanting to move into our old house. I understand Marcy's motives for wanting to move into our old house. She seemed a bit confused. I see, she responded, appearing unsure. It was obvious she needed assistance but was hesitant to ask. As the conversation paused, I off, is there anything else I can do for you? Marcy hesitated before asking, could you give me a ride to the Holiday Inn? The ride started smoothly, but then Marcy brought up my friend telling me that she was moving in with Clayton. Not really a girlfriend, more like a business partner. I explained what kind of business she was exploring. We're not into any business, to be honest, I'm just a clerk at the grocery store, I admitted. Marcy remained silent, gazing out the window, muttering under her breath, bastard. At that moment I had the perfect opportunity to express myself. I had the perfect opportunity to express my frustration, to let her know how much those newspaper pictures hurt me. But instead I chose to remain silent and smiled inwardly. Seeing Marcy in distress, I felt a twinge of guilt, but it passed quickly as I dropped her off at the motel entrance. Thursday morning brought an unexpected delivery. The final divorce papers arrived earlier than expected, but I wasn't complaining. On the front page of the Huntsville paper was a photo of Letitia Rothberg arriving at the airport, accompanied by her sincere friend. Every room at the Holiday Inn received a complimentary newspaper, so Marcy would undoubtedly stumble across it at breakfast. I emptied the safe deposit box at the bank, ready to move forward. My 7 pennies will definitely come in handy soon. I expected her to inquire about them during Letitia's visit, but she never brought it up. All our conversations were purely social now. More than half of the coins sold at that price, so I spent the rest of the day packing and preparing them for shipment. The remaining auctions had to end by noon on Friday. If all the PayPal payments go smoothly, I'll be able to ship all the coins the same day. I hit the road Saturday morning. Most of the money from my PayPal account was wired to my Cayman account. I kept a small amount on PayPal just in case I wanted to make an impulse purchase on my way out the door. The buyers of the house arrived, making it a win-win situation for both of us. Win situation for both of us. The drive up north would take about 12 hours with no delays. Letitia was waiting at the apartment and promised to prepare a homemade dinner for my return. I wondered who would cook it. It was reassuring to know I still had what it takes to capture the heart of such a stunning woman. I was confident I could meet her expectations. I was confident that I could live up to all of her expectations. Just as I entered Virginia on Interstate 81, Cindy called me. It turned out that Clayton Manning had skipped town, leaving Marcy stranded with no car, no place to stay, no money, and a huge motel bill. I asked Cindy what she thought I should do, and she laughed and said, just smile.